stories matter because God uniquely changes our lives on a very individual level. And my story is going to be different than my friends. They're both powerful, they're both important. But unless I'm willing to share it, I can't expect someone to know how God has transformed me or what He's done in my life.
The fact that I have a relationship with God is because of God doing something in my life. And I think that God's not wasteful. God isn't the kind of God who does something but doesn't use it. He isn't like us in that sense. Like, he isn't like the kind of person who'll make food and have leftovers and toss them in the garbage. And the fact that God has made my story means that He plans to use it. There's no leftovers in the way God functions. And so, like, if God has called me into a relationship with Him through Christ, and God's called other students and other people into a relationship with Him through Christ, there's none of them that are leftovers whose lives He cannot use to help people come into a relationship with Him. He will use it, like, He will make it happen.
I would say that, you know, it amazes me, but God for some reason has chosen people as His message bearers. And you know, He could have chosen monkeys or rocks. I could think of a lot of better things that He could have chosen as His message bearers, but He chose people. And I could think of a lot of better people than me, morally, with my, you know, even being clear. But for some reason, He's chose me. And so my response is to use my story.
The more I get to know Him, the more I realize how little I know Him, or how little I know myself. And so life's an adventure, just figuring out who I am and where I'm going and where God's taking me. And so my testimony is not just one point in time, but it's the whole process of how God continues to change me.
It's just really neat to see how every single person is important. Important to God, important to people. I love hearing my friends' stories. I love getting to share in their story, to get to be a part of their journey, even if they're not the Prime Minister of Canada or someone really important by the world's standards. They still are important to me.
One of the reasons why I think stories are important are because most people can identify with stories. Like, I find that's how I relate to people. I identify with them on some level. Like, you know, whether it's like a girl who's talking about dating a non-Christian, and I was totally like in a long-term relationship when I started walking with God in the same capacity and struggling with the same questions. So my story allows me to relate to her, and so I think that's one of the reasons.
And our stories take on power and meaning as and when we are honest with what God has done in our lives up until that very point. I don't need to be the Apostle Paul. I need to be a Bon Jesumani. And in that, as God uses me and molds me and shapes my story, there is power in that.
We have commonalities. We're not really good looking, we're not great, we're not super creative, we're not super eloquent, you know? And so I do think that there are, you know, as Erwin McManus would say, there are themes that run in our lives, and you can think of it in terms of destiny, intimacy, meaning, but there's also a lot of other themes. And the ability to connect relationally with people is really important to, you know, to sharing the gospel and the gospel story.
Also, it's your story, so people can't argue with your personal experience. It's something that you experience that's very unique to you, and that's a way that you can share with others as well.
My story matters just as much as someone who was so far off from God, or someone who is such a big celebrity, because there's more people actually like me than like them. There's more people who are actually everyday average, middle income type students than people who are celebrities or people who are so far off.
Some of my deepest times of connecting with God and people have been when either one of us has kind of opened up and shared a snippet or a segment or a wedge of our lives and of our journeys. And a certain kind of bond and connection happens that I really can't explain, but it happens in the context of storytelling.
Yeah, you know what? My situation in my life is very similar to yours. I went through the same struggles that you did in high school, and I had the same friends that you sounded like you had in high school, and my life circumstances sound very similar to yours. And if Jesus made such a big difference in your life, and my life sounds very similar to yours, then like maybe Jesus can make a difference in my life too. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that happen, so I do know that my life story does impact people, and I definitely do think that my life story can continue to impact people and draw them closer to Christ.
God is what makes my story. My story would be much different if it wasn't for the way that Jesus has worked through my life and the people that he's brought into my life, and the way that he's helped me through some difficult experiences. So yeah, just knowing that God is behind my story and intertwined in my story and is still writing my story gives me a lot of hope and excitement for the future.